Yo, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So it is the biggest video of the entire year, arguably. I am going to be giving you my Stanley Cup playoff prediction. Started in the first round, working our way all the way down to the Stanley Cup Final. I'm not doing this in multiple parts. I am just letting it rip. It's one of those years, it is wide open. I do not think I've ever seen a year that's more wide open in terms of 7 or 8 teams. Legitimately, I would not be shocked if they ended up winning the Stanley Cup. I like my picks. I have reasoning. I have logic behind my picks, but I don't love them compared to maybe other years. It is just fantastic. The amount of tight first round matchups, potential second round matchups of teams that you expected to go deep that are going to get tested very early on. It's going to be very fascinating. So without further ado, we're going to start in the Metro Division, kind of the two most boring matchups, in my opinion. Up first, the New York Rangers and the Washington Capitals, and I have the Rangers winning this in 5 games. So when looking at it, the Rangers just have so much more talent. I talked about it earlier today. And also on the first round matchups, I'm going to go through it. I'm going to go through my logic. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I spent a lot this morning doing that. But when looking at the New York Rangers, they have pretty easily the 4 best players in this series. And then beyond that, probably another 3 out of the next 5. It is just a massive talent gap. I'm not sure the Washington Capitals, talent-wise as well as honestly speed-wise, can keep up with the New York Rangers. And the Capitals don't really do anything at a high level that maybe you could say, oh, if they dominate the Rangers in that aspect, they can potentially exploit that and end up winning this series. The Capitals, their power play penalty kill has been better, obviously, in the back half of the season, but they're 19th in terms of the penalty kill, 18th in terms of the power play. If they were top 5 out of nowhere, I could say maybe if they got lucky with penalties, they could go on a run, but it would have to be an absolute carry job by Charlie Lindgren, who's been playing very good, especially down the stretch. Overall, arguably been a top 10 goalie this entire season, but he's going up against a guy that I trust a lot in the playoffs in Igor Shesterkin. So I still think the Rangers have that advantage in net, and that's probably the one thing that they come the closest in terms of the New York Rangers. So Rangers in 5, I could see it going 6. Getting it to 7 would be tough, and overall the Capitals winning, I would give them like a 10 to 15% chance. Not saying it's impossible, anything could happen, but I do think that this is probably the most lopsided first round matchup in the entire playoffs. Don't think I'm ridiculous at all for saying that. Next up, my New York Islanders versus the Carolina Hurricanes. I got Carolina in 6 yet again. You look at them last year, the series was very close. Four games were decided by one or more, a couple of overtime games, but that was without Svechnikov. That was when they still had Max Pacioretty's cap hit on the books. They weren't able to spend at the deadline without him being there. So they didn't go that aggressive at the deadline compared to this year. Healthy Svechnikov, Gensel, Orlov they got in the offseason. Jarvis takes a massive step. So I just think that this Carolina Hurricanes team, not only are they fantastic defensively, but now they have some of the finishing to really put away the Islanders in 5, maybe 6 games. The Carolina Hurricanes, also the special teams battle is just unfair in terms of this series. They actually had the second best power play in the entire NHL. That kind of shocked me when I found that out. Meanwhile, the Islanders have the worst penalty kill in the entire NHL at 71.5%. So yeah, and then even when it comes to the Canes penalty kill, it's second best in the entire NHL, and the Islanders have, I believe, the 19th best, very below average. And when it comes to goaltending, the gap isn't nearly what we thought, what it was last season coming into it, after Sorokin was arguably the best goalie in the entire NHL. He's struggled a decent amount. Varley has looked very good in the last third of the season, but Anderson and Kochetkov have also looked good. So the one thing that I thought maybe was a clear advantage for my New York Islanders, I still maybe would give Varley the nod, but it's no longer what I thought it was. So they lose the special teams, they lose the 5-on-5 physicality. I might even lean Carolina. Pace of play, probably Carolina as well. I think New York Islanders are just a less talented Carolina overall, and as a result, they're going to lose in 6 games. Florida versus Tampa, the Battle of Florida. I got the Florida Panthers winning this in 6 games. In 2022 and 2021, Tampa beat up on Florida, swept them in 2022 after they won the President's Trophy. That was wild. And then in 2021, beat them in 6 games. But I do think it is drastically different when looking at these teams. Tampa has far less depth, and as a result, that's why I'm going with the Florida Panthers in 6 games. Tampa still has superstars that maybe can take over a series, but So does goddamn Florida. They never played a Matthew Tkachuk Florida team, as well as Reinhart scoring 57 goals. Forsling has really emerged, not a superstar, but he's far, far better than when they played back in 2021 and 2022. And when looking at it, Florida's pace is very, very high. Second most shots in the entire NHL compared to Tampa's 2021. So considering Tampa doesn't have that, I've talked about it a lot when talking about Tampa potentially going on a run. The fact that they don't have that number 2 defenseman like they've had in prior years in a Mikhail Sergachev against a team that likes to run it, I think Tampa is going to get worn down by this Florida attack. And as a result, they're going to take care of business in 5, maybe 5 games, most likely 6 games. And even in net, obviously Vasilevsky's like a more talented goaltender, I would say, but from game 1 of the playoffs last year to now, Bobrovsky has been far better than Vasilevsky. I still maybe would trust Vasilevsky a little bit more, but based on the on-ice play of late, Bobrovsky's been better, so I don't really see how Tampa can overcome this. They have a fantastic top 3 defenseman. Tampa, it's really just Hedman for the most part, and even him, his defensive numbers have dropped off. And especially in the bottom 6, I think Florida does have an advantage compared to Tampa. They got some goddamn like NPCs down there that you wouldn't even know their name if you heard it for the first time. Next up, finishing off the Eastern Conference, Leafs versus Bruins. I said this morning Leafs in 6. Then I really dove into this series, and I'm actually going to go with the Bruins in 7 games. The Leafs, their defense core is just like straight up bad. It's not good. It's really not good. Morgan Riley's not a legit number 1. They're goddamn healthy scratching TJ Brody in the first game. This Leafs team is not that impressive, and especially when you hear that William Nylander might not even play in game 1, I am going to switch on that. I think Bruins, the gap in goal is so massive. I don't even love the Bruins. I don't even love either of these teams. Let me just say that. I said it earlier today. I think both of these teams are fugazi, and Florida's, not to spoil the video, but I think Florida's going to steamroll both. So in looking at it, but I do think the Bruins with their physicality advantage, although the Toronto Maple Leafs are more physical this season, I think that they'll be able to take off maybe some of the forward talent that they lack compared to the Toronto Maple Leafs with their defensive core as well as goaltending. I think the Boston Bruins are going to take care of business and win this in 7 games, even though earlier this morning I did say Toronto in 6 games. But I would not be shocked if Toronto wins this. This is the most even, best opportunity that they've had to beat a Boston Bruins team. But if they don't have William Nylander, that's really bad considering he consistently shows up in the playoffs. I got the Boston Bruins in 7 games. So moving on to the Western Conference, our first matchup is the best matchup in the Western Conference and is going to be absolute war, and that is the Dallas Stars versus the Vegas Golden Knights. I'm going to go with the Dallas Stars in 7 games. It just stinks that this is the first round matchup. If the Knights were in the Pacific side of the bracket, this would probably be my Western Conference final yet again. I know that would be basic because, again, they did make the Western Conference finals last year, both of them, but I'm going to go with Dallas. Vegas, I don't know if they have the full team chemistry considering guys have been in and out of the lineup compared to Dallas is just so deep, been healthy for most of the season, and as a result has dominated. Dallas, since that Western Conference final, added Stan Coven, added Duchesne, a much improved Wyatt Johnston and Thomas Harley. Vegas, they lost Riley Smith, but obviously did add Hurdle and Hannafin. So I think this is going to be an absolute battle when looking at it, but I do think Dallas, with their extreme depth, Vegas also does have very good depth. I think they will be able to edge it out a little bit for the Dallas Stars, and also Aiden Hill's play has not been that impressive. Jake Ottinger hasn't been that good as well, but maybe Jake Ottinger can outplay him this year, considering Hill did outplay him by a decent amount last year. Next up, Colorado Avalanche versus the Winnipeg Jets. Everything in my brain tells me Jets, better team, deeper team, better goaltender. It's the Jets. Don't think about it. You're thinking about it too much. You're going with your gut, and I am going to go with my gut. I'm going to go with the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games. And this is, Jets fans, you're 1,000% correct to list the reasons why I should go with the Winnipeg Jets. It's valid. I agree. My brain says Jets in 6, but I just think it's going to be extremely hard for them to shut down Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen. And although they aren't as deep as Winnipeg Jets, they do have some solid depth players. It's not even depth. Arturi Lehkonen, Valery Nichushkin, Casey Middlestad has been solid. They have more depth definitely than last season. And beyond that, I can't see the Colorado Avalanche losing in back-to-back seasons. I am going to go with them, although I can admit, as long as they get .905 goaltending from Georgiev, who has been very bad of late, I think they do take care of this season, because when looking at it, the regular season, it was an absolute bloodbath. Winnipeg beat them 17-3, but they did get 78% goaltending. That's not going to repeat itself. It's not like the Winnipeg Jets absolutely bludgeoned the Colorado Avalanche in terms of 45 shots a game, high danger chances. Their goaltenders were just god awful this year, or that in those games. On the whole, they were pretty disappointing. But I think if Georgiev can play half decent, I do think that Colorado Avalanche will take care of business. But in my head, I know that the sound, smart pick would be the Winnipeg Jets. I'm going with the gut. If I'm wrong, I'll hand up and say, bad pick by me. Colorado in 6. Trust Hart Nathan McKinnon to put the team on his back. I'm not sure that they can stop him. Canucks versus Predators. I have the Canucks winning this in 6 games. Pretty interesting matchup when looking at it. I think these two teams obviously far exceeded expectations this season, but I am going to go with the Canucks. For me, it's the forward depth. I think that Nashville's top line of Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Nyquist can keep up with one of Vancouver's top 2 lines. Nashville's top line has been one of the best top lines in all of hockey. But beyond that, man, Nashville lacks a lot of forward depth. Their second line right now is Colton Sissons, Jason Zucker, and Mark Jakowski. It's not good, Paz. They're bottom 9 compared to the Canucks, who had one of the best third lines in the entire NHL cooking at one point. I think the Canucks are going to be able to feast on that bottom 9 from Nashville. If Nashville would win this series, it's going to have to be a generational UC Saros 948 save percentage. And I think even if he does that, it's still probably going to go to 6, maybe even 7 games. They're going to need to have him play absolutely fantastic. But I think the Vancouver Canucks are just the better and far deeper team and have more superstar talent than the Nashville Predators, although the Nashville Predators have been arguably the best team in the entire NHL since like February 1st. They shouldn't be taken lightly. I'm not saying that they're the Washington Capitals by any stretch, but I have the Vancouver Canucks in 6 games. Next up, LA Kings versus Edmonton. I'm going to go with Edmonton in 5 games. 2 years ago, it went to 7 games. Last year, 6 games. I think it is going to go to 5 games. These are kind of the battle of opposites when looking at it. Edmonton is 3rd in the NHL in goals per 60, and 1st in the NHL in expected goals per 60, versus the LA Kings are 3rd in goals against per 60 and 6th in goals against per 60. So you got the basically all defensive team versus Edmonton that is fantastic offensively. But I do think Edmonton's defense is much better, not much better, but definitely better comparatively than the LA Kings offense, especially with Matthias Ekholm, a full season of Matthias Ekholm, him and Bouchard forming arguably the best pair in the entire NHL. Bouchard breaking out as not just an offensive defenseman, a guy that can play both ways and can play 23 minutes a night. When looking at it, the LA Kings rank like 12th in expected goals per 60 versus the Edmonton Oilers rank 5th in expected goals against per 60. So they're 1st in expected goals for, 5th in expected goals against. The LA Kings are a good team. I think they would have been a dangerous draw if they played like the Vancouver Canucks. But I think as long as the Edmonton Oilers can get 905 goaltending out of Stuart Skinner, I think the Edmonton Oilers are going to be able to score on the LA Kings at a decently high rate and get out of this series pretty unscathed. They will get pretty physical, but I think the LA Kings or the Edmonton Oilers are going to take care of business. So we're out of the first round now. We're going over to not Washington, Rangers versus the Carolina Hurricanes, and I am going to be going with Carolina in 7 games. I'm not a Rangers hater. Let me explain. I when looking at this matchup, I still like Carolina in terms of 5-on-5 dominance. And as I talked about before, they still have the number 2 power play and number 1 penalty kill. So they also are better on the special teams in terms of Carolina, as well as being better than the New York Rangers, as well as being a far better 5-on-5 team. The Rangers, it kind of was a flop, Jack Roslovic and Alex Wennberg. They're solid players. They're probably third liners versus the Carolina Hurricanes. Go out and get a superstar like Jake Gensel. So in looking at it, I just think the Carolina Hurricanes, as long as they don't take stupid penalties and let that Rangers power play cook, I think they are going to be able to take care of business. And similarly to what I was talking about before with the Islanders and their goaltending situation, I still trust Igor Shesterkin more than Carolina's goaltenders, but the gap was massive a month or 2 ago when thinking about, Kochetkov against Igor Shesterkin. That's not even in the same stratosphere, but considering Anderson has been so good and Kochetkov in his own right since then has a 927 save percentage in his finals 17 games on the season, I think that gap has closed. So when you look at the 5-on-5 numbers, when you look at the special teams, I am going to go with Carolina. I think they're going to take care of business. I think they are a far deeper team than the New York Rangers. It's unfortunate for the New York Rangers. if they were in the Western Conference, if they were even in the Atlantic Division, I would maybe have them making the conference finals. I do think they are a top 5 team in the NHL, but I just really like Carolina, and as a result, I'm going to have them advancing to the Eastern Conference Finals. Florida versus Boston. Florida versus Boston. I got Florida winning in 5 games. I think that this is when Boston's lack of depth really gets exposed. When looking at their forward core, it's Pasta. Then there's a decent drop off to Brad Marchand. He's no longer an elite player. He's still very good. Then you got Pavel Zacha. Then you got Charlie Coyle. Then you got Jake DeBrusk. That's just not that impressive of a top 5 versus the Florida Panthers. You got Barkov, Kachuk, absolute superstars. Reinhart, fantastic. Verhaeghe, I believe, had another 40-goal season this year. Tarasenko, Bennett, Rodriguez. I think that Florida just has far too much depth. And even in the defensive pairs, yes, you got McAvoy and Lindholm, I believe, have been playing together. Forsling and Ekblad have been actually the better pair comparing the two, as well as Florida also having a guy like Brandon Montour that can generate a ton of offense from their second pair. So I think that their depth would just be far overwhelming for the Boston Bruins, and they can also match the physicality of a Boston Bruins. We saw that last year in the final 3 games of their series. Obviously, honestly, the entire series, but especially in those final 3 games, I think Florida would take care of business against the Boston Bruins. Moving on to the Western Conference, Dallas versus Colorado in the Central Division Final, if you want to call it that. I have the Dallas Stars winning this in 6 games, similarly to what I just said with Boston and Florida. Florida's depth just getting the best of Boston. I think it kind of would be the same here. Colorado does have some solid depth, but when looking at the Dallas Stars, third line of Jamie Benn, Wyatt Johnston, and Logan Stankoven compared to the Colorado Avalanche, it's not a bad third line, but it's Miles Wood, Ross Colton, Zach Parise. Their depth is just absolutely disgusting in terms of defensemen as well. Esa Lindell, Ryan Suter on their second and third pair. Sean Walker's a decent defenseman, not on that same level. Gerard's a solid offensive defenseman, but nothing special. So I think here on top of, I trust Jake Ottinger way more than Alexander Georgiev. Not saying that Jake Ottinger is my most trustworthy goaltender in these playoffs, but I think Dallas is just the far deeper team than the Colorado Avalanche and would get this done. Not easy by any stretch, but would win it in 6 games. I don't think that this would see 7 games. Next up, Vancouver versus Edmonton. I think that if you ever, the same thing that happened last year in Edmonton in the second round, and Hyman, Kane, and RNH absolutely go invisible. Last year, they had 2 goals combined in 6 games, 18 games total between the 3 of them. They went ghost mode. If that happens again, I think Vancouver ends up winning it. I think that doesn't happen, though. I think Edmonton gets some depth scoring in the second round this year. I think it goes to 7 games, though. This would be a war because even with those guys that I just mentioned, I still think Vancouver probably is the deeper team in terms of the forward core and maybe even the defense core as well. So I think that this would have to be a McDavid and Draisaitl carry, and I do think that they could carry against this Vancouver defense core. Last year against Vegas, Vegas is a very physical, heavy defense core. Obviously, their top 2 guys in Vancouver aren't the most physically imposing guys, so I think the McDavid and Draisaitl combo would be able to will them. Can it will them to the Stanley Cup? We'll get to that in a little bit, but I think Edmonton would be able to get it done in 7 games against Vancouver. The goaltending also does lean Vancouver. This is similarly to, I'm not going to lie, the Winnipeg and Colorado series. Traditions would say Vancouver should beat Edmonton, but I just think you can have the 15, 16-point series from McDavid and Draisaitl here where they absolutely carry, especially on the power play, and get Edmonton back to the Western Conference Finals, and that's kind of what I expect to happen. Next up, Florida versus Carolina in the Eastern Conference Finals. I have Carolina in 6 games. It's a rematch of the 2023 Eastern Conference Finals, which was a sweep, as much as Ron Brindamore wants to say that it wasn't a sweep, but it was a very close sweep. First 2 games went to overtime. That last final 4th game, Matthew Tkachuk needed it with like 5 seconds, or scored it with 5 seconds left. Very close series. So I think, again, harkening back to that New York Islanders series, the fact that they have Svechnikov, they have Gensel, they have Orlov. Florida also did add a decent amount, but I think Carolina's defense core is just better than the Florida Panthers. The top 3 of Burns, Slavin, and Brady Shea are on the same level, maybe even better than Forsling, Ekblad, and Montour, but especially the bottom 3 in that defense core, Brett Pesce, Orlov, Chatfield versus Nico Mikkola, OEL, Kulikov. I think that clearly leans in Carolina's favor. And although Florida maybe has the best, their top 4 of forwards, Reinhart, Tkachuk, Barkov, Verhaeghe, are better than Carolina's 4 best, which would be Aho, Gensel, Svechnikov, Jarvis. Honestly, that's pretty close. But I think Carolina has far more depth in terms of their bottom 8 forwards compared to Florida's. Florida's solid, very good third line. Fourth line, I think Carolina is deep throughout the entire lineup. And going back to it again, Carolina has one of the best power plays and penalty kills in the entire NHL. I would lean them in terms of the special teams battle. Goaltending would lean Florida, but I think that we would have a reversal of last year, and Carolina would go on to win the series. Finally get to the Stanley Cup Final. It just feels long overdue considering how consistently good they've been over the last 4 to 5 years. I think they get over the hump. I think they have the finishing touch to actually put it away against Carolina. They were so close last year against Carolina. And again, 3 out of the 4 games, they just didn't have the finishing. I think with the emergence of Seth Jarvis as a legit, what do you have this year, like 32 goals? Svechnikov, obviously a good guy for 30 to 35 goals, as well as goddamn Jake Gensel. I think they finally have the finishing to put it together and get to the Stanley Cup Final. Dallas versus Edmonton. This is where I think McDavid and Draisaitl can't outscore Edmonton's lack of depth per se. When looking at it, Dallas, again, I already hearkened to that third line, as well as their deep defense core. I think Dallas would be able to overwhelm them. Heiskanen and Harley could lock down McDavid and Draisaitl, or you got guys, again, like Tanev and Lindell that are fantastic defensively. I think that Peter DeBoer would scheme very good in this game. A tactical battle in terms of shutting those two guys down. Let Warren Fogle, Ryan McLeod, or Zach Hyman plays McDavid, but you know what I mean? Like, let their bottom 6 try to beat you, and I don't think that's the case. And I'm not sure past that top pair of Edmonton if they could slow down Dallas's insane depth. In net, I would trust Jake Ottinger more than Stuart Skinner, so I think Dallas takes care of business and wins this in 6. And then we got our Stanley Cup Final. Dallas versus Carolina. This would be insane. I'm going with Dallas in 7. Dallas was my pick 2 months ago. I'm not a bandwagoner like some people that they've been like arguably the best team in the entire NHL the last month or two. I said this before. I said this like the day before they got blown out by Colorado when I did my pre-deadline predictions. I'm sticking with Dallas. Although I think the underlying numbers and maybe even the eye test slightly leans Carolina, I think Dallas's veteran hunger. You got guys like Pavelski, Suter, Duchesne, I'm trying to think one other, Jamie Benn, that need that Stanley Cup. It just seems due for the Dallas Stars after making the Western Conference Finals last year. They take another step. So many guys on their team have improved. And Jake Ottinger, if he made it to the Stanley Cup Final first round, I don't have that much faith in Jake Ottinger. But if he gets some momentum going, I would trust Jake Ottinger more in net than a Freddie Anderson, than a Kochetkov. So I am going with the Dallas Stars as my Stanley Cup champion. I do think that this series would go 7 games. It would be great. I think these probably are the 2 best, most complete teams in the entire NHL. You can call it maybe a basic pick. Let's go to the final. Call it maybe a basic pick, but I feel like there's no real basic pick. I believe the Hurricanes are actually the Cup favorites at like plus 650. But yeah, there's 4 or 5 teams that are legit contenders. So I had to pick some of them to go far in the playoffs. I wasn't going to be different and have like the Nashville Predators making the Stanley Cup Finals. So let me know in the comments, what do you think about this bracket? This was a very long video. Thank you guys so much who have been watching my content leading up to this in the past 6 months. We are going to go balls to the wall in these playoffs. Let me know in the comments any video ideas regarding the playoffs that you would love to see. And I'll be seeing you very soon, probably, in the next one.